All right. Extra special treat tonight. I'm thrilled to have Jordan Wagman here. He is the James Beard nominated chef, a best-selling author, a culinary cannabis expert for our goals tonight, and a truly genuine, nice guy who cares about people, who cares about the cannabis community and the world we're sort of thriving in. And I think most important of all, he is a husband and father. The two characteristics that I hold dear personally as a dad and husband myself. So Jordan, is welcome to have you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. It's as I said, it's nice to see you face to face, where typically I'm only hearing that amazing voice of yours. But so
that's
really
right. Yeah, for folks who are watching and don't know, Jordan and I are both regulars on Clubhouse. And for anybody who isn't on, you really should join. It's a wonderful community, very intimate, very friendly, and a really warm community.
Yeah, and very supportive, for the most part. I really love that aspect of it. I've made some amazing I've made some amazing connections and people that have become friends. Mm-hmm. So yeah, no, I love my clubhouses. As a matter of fact, most of my podcast guests over the course of the last 8 weeks, maybe even 12 weeks, have resulted from relationships built on Clubhouse.
That's funny. Yeah, it's such a close-knit pool, because you're really, you feel like you're in the same room with someone, you're getting to know their voice. And I think, we're very, of course, social animals, but built on voice and built on inflection. We have, as part of our brain's auditory system, we have both a understanding of words and syntax, but we also have a prosody. We learn, who are the monotonous people and speak like that, and you really don't want to talk to them. And then we have people that are more expressive, and we're really drawn to voice. It's such an intimate part of being human.
And you really can't hide behind your thoughts. It's because it's all improv, right? It's just conversation. So if you're going to have a thought, oftentimes it's going to come out.
Right out.
It's going to come out. And so you really get to know certain people or everyone very quickly.
Yeah, that's really true. And the people that are sort of not pre-recorded, but primed, to sort of spew their spiel, it's boring, and you don't hang out with people like that. You don't follow them, and you don't end up seeing them again.
Yeah, no, very true. Very true. Absolutely. So, I don't know if you remember, or even if I've told you my sort of background, but at the age of 12, I was diagnosed with psoriasis. And I woke up one morning, and I always talk about the Corey Hart years because I had spiked hair at the time. And I woke up with 3 huge patches of psoriasis on my scalp, 2 that were positioned right in the forefront of my scalp that were, where the spiked hair clumped together and to form what looked like 2 horns on the top of my head. And it was quite appropriate because I wasn't, I really did struggle with mental health as a child, and my entire life, not as a child, my entire life, because it's, physical health and mental health are sort of intertwined. Sure. And every decision I made in my life subsequent to being diagnosed was revolved around my health, and specifically my skin. And I wrote every high school exam in the hospital, and I lived in a tent at the Dead Sea in Israel getting psoriasis treatments for a year of my life. I'd wake up and suntan for 14 hours a day. And I call that, Dr. Kaplan, the first piece to my health puzzle. And it was only 6 years ago that I found the second. And that was at 43 years old. I sought the help of a naturopath. And from this one meeting, I removed gluten, dairy, and refined sugar from my diet and began consuming cannabis. And everything changed. 60 days, literally within 60 days, 30 pounds melted off my body, and my psoriasis started to get better. And even when I have a flare-up, like I am right now, because I actually got the second dose of my vaccine, and I actually did get a flare-up as a result of that. And I'll recover much faster. I come back to center because the peaks are much lower, the valleys are much shallower. Everything is pretty much on an even keel now because of my cannabis consumption, because of my diet, specifically the refined sugar. And I've always used cannabis, always, since I was 13 years old. I would go for UVA treatment, UVB treatment, so light treatment therapy for my psoriasis, and I would get burnt. Same thing that happened today. I have lights, I have a little bit of a flare up, and you can see how bright red this is. It's because I went for treatment today, and I know that I will need to employ cannabis to sleep this evening, but I have since I was 13 years old. And I never once, and believe me, never once did I ever put two and two together that there was actually a medicinal purpose to having that cannabis in the middle of the night, that it wasn't just, something that I enjoyed doing that I found by happenstance that made me go to sleep. I waited many decades later to actually realize that I could employ cannabis for health and wellness as well.
I can't imagine as a young boy, being just torn away from your culture, your social culture, your life, and having gone through that. It must have been absolutely horrible.
Well, I went to summer camp. I met my wife at summer camp. I went to summer camp since I was sleepaway camp. So 2 months every summer I would leave. And most of my friends don't realize this, and they're still my friends today. But I went many summers without taking off my shirt. I went summers without taking off my long pants and wearing track pants because I was covered head to toe. And so, yeah, it certainly was hard, and it played, with my mental health. And so, I lost a friend to mental health 2 weeks ago, and it's been a very tough road because he influenced all of us, and continent to continent across the globe. He was just an amazing human being. But I always say that I really found my mental health when I found my physical health, because I never really, and when I was younger, I went to a school in the 11th grade called the Jerome B. Diamond Adolescent Center here in Toronto. And there's 30 kids in this school. And I was the oldest in the 11th grade. And they really helped to put tools in my toolbox. I discovered music at the time, so I had outlets. I also love to cook, so I discovered food, I discovered music, and realized I'm an artist. So instead of getting angry about my skin, I'd get in the kitchen or I'd play my music. As I said to you offline, my guitar's never too far from me because music is therapeutic for me. But I discovered that there were ways to actually use that energy in a positive way. And that's what I started to do in the 11th grade. And it's been enlightening for me. But I really struggled with mental health. And of course, I still do. I call myself now a mental health survivor. My brother, Ryan Wagman, is a brilliant writer in New York. He wrote a piece last week after we lost our friend. And he said, the world doesn't need another mental health advocate. We need more mental health survivors. And, so I call myself that. And I believe that I started to really survive the mental health battle when I became physically healthier.
It's funny. Oprah, and I have obviously no relationship with her, but Oprah is doing a show now on mental health and trying to highlight real stories. I think it's called The Me You Can't See on Apple TV. And it's really interesting. I think, with the British Prince, with Meghan Markle, and he's coming out sort of helping people destigmatize mental health. I think we're in the midst of a change, hopefully, where people are a little bit more embracing, supporting survivorship for mental health and perseverance. And interestingly, there's a pretty clear parallel between mental health stigma and cannabis stigma.
I was just going to say exactly the same thing. And that's what we're fighting against. Those are the conversations that no one wants to have. Mental health is not a conversation that a lot of people want to have because, quote unquote, it's uncomfortable. Well, Dr. Kaplan, that's why I make myself, I don't hide behind social media. On all my platforms, I I show, because we said this offline, more people are going to resonate with how I'm suffering than any success that I've ever had. I've written many books, but not everyone's going to resonate with them. They might want to buy them. They might want to look at them. They may never, but they're going to resonate with the fact that I'm going through a hard time with my skin, and physically it's debilitating. That's what people will resonate with. So I'm very specific in putting myself out there so that people know it's okay to have that conversation. It's okay to cry. I cry at long distance commercials, but I cry. You know, I have no problem letting it out there. I have no problem playing sad music when I'm sad. I have no problem with Neil Diamond, Hello Again from Jazz Singer, you know, coming on my guitar. I have no problem with that because it makes me feel good, but it also resonates with other people. And if I can help people do that, just bring what it is they're struggling with to the forefront and let them know that there are other people who are feeling exactly the same, people resonate with that. And that's going to be helpful.
Yeah, no, I think more than that, Jordan, there are very few people who don't struggle. I mean, I don't know anybody. You know, everybody in some capacity is dealing with pain and difficulty and trauma and trial. And, you know, I think we somehow put these faces out there to convince other people that, oh, we're not suffering, that everything is rosy and golden. But the truth is that's just a mask. And then we all wear them to some extent.
Absolutely, 100%. 100%.
Wait. So Jordan, you're doing all kinds of interesting things over here. Can you explain a little bit about what's going on?
I was going to segue to that. So when I removed gluten, dairy, and refined sugar from my diet, I had to relearn how to make a lot of the food stuff that I always loved to eat. I grew up, Haagen-Dazs was a food group. You know, I loved meatballs and really rich foods and meatloaf. In Boca Raton, we'd go to all the, restaurants there, or Christmas, whatever else, and you'd always get the meatloaf with the front. Like, I love decadent food, and that's never changed. What's changed is that I had to relearn how to make all the food stuff that I always loved with ingredients that me, my body, and my natural path approve of. So the chicken kale meatballs has become one of my signature dishes. 2 ingredients in chicken kale meatballs. We don't have to guess what they are. We know what they are: ground chicken and kale. It's all about technique. So, and this is available on my website, and I'm happy to share it with your community as well. It's my pleasure to do that. And, chicken kale meatballs, it's just about a chiffonade of the kale. So chiffonade is thin little ribbons like you would with basil. You can do it with scissors. You can do it with your knife, similar to this, right? So all we're doing is we're just rolling this up, really, really tight bunch. And we're going to use the entire contour of the knife right here. And we're just going to go and cut really, really, really thin ribbons. And when you cut these thin ribbons, what happens is it does 2 things. One, the kale, okay, so these are the thin ribbons. The kale does 2 things. One, it provides structure when you cut it into these thin ribbons, because the ground chicken doesn't really have a lot of substance to it. It's very loose. So this provides a lot of structure to it. The other amazing thing that the kale does, it's a pretty rigid, pretty firm green. Spinach is not going to work. Chard is not going to work in this recipe, okay? They give off way too much water. But kale adds moisture. When we make meatloaf or hamburgers or meatballs, we add a panade, okay? So a panade in a classic French restaurant is going to be heavy cream or milk with a brioche or challah, some sort of egg bread that creates a paste that gives that beef even more incredible moisture. Here, this is my panade. So not only does the kale add the structure, but it adds the moisture. So when we're cooking the chicken kale meatballs, and we add salt and pepper always, I don't include those in my ingredients. So if anyone wants to pick a fight, okay, so there are 4 ingredients, but really there's 2. But all we're looking for when we cook the chicken kale meatballs is for them to become firm, which these are, and the kale turns bright green. And this is my signature dish. And it was bred out of a necessity. What was my necessity? I needed to create food that I love. So this is really simple. And I talk about different techniques in the kitchen and the importance of when we seared the chicken kale meatballs, we always sear it in a hot pan. You always sear everything in a hot pan. That creates your nonstick surface. How do you know when your food stuff is ready to flip? Because it will release from the pan. If these chicken kale meatballs are sticking to the pan, don't try to flip them. Wait until another minute or two. Wait until they start to release from the pan naturally, and then you flip them. That's searing. Deglazing, we're gonna add a little bit of liquid to the pan, because when we sear anything, little bits of food get stuck to the bottom of the pan, and we lift that up. It's called fond, F-O-N-D, and we lift them up with water, with stock, with wine. I only use water. I'll use vinegar. I don't use wine and stock because honestly, Dr. Kaplan, I want everyone that cooks with me, whether virtually or in person, to know that yes, my food is great. It is. I love my food. I am a good cook, but it's simple. And you know what? You can all make it at home. You can recreate it at home because all you need is water. You never have to have stock or wine. So we're gonna deglaze, right? So we seared, we had a little bits of food are stuck to the bottom of the pan. We're deglazing, and now we're just gonna let it rest. And my analogy for the importance of letting all your proteins rest is you go swimming in cold water and all the blood runs through your organs, protects the insides. And in order to relax, you get out of the cold water, you put on your onesie and you cover in a blanket and you go sit by the fireplace and all the blood starts to distribute again. Same thing applies to all your proteins. When you subject that scallop, when you subject the chicken, when you subject the steak, whatever it is, to heat, all the juice is coming to the inside. If you cut it too early, it ends up on the bottom of your plate. If you allow the juice to disperse, now when you slice that, where's the juice? Inside the protein where it belongs. So the rule of thumb is that you allow your proteins to rest for 30 to 50% of its cooking time. 100% of the time, there's no exceptions to that, okay? So this is what I'm doing. My favorite thing, and I wanna talk about, so cannabis it's part of my everyday life. But, and there are a lot of people with many different approaches to infusing cannabis into food and beverage. Mine is one approach, okay? I'm microdose. Microdosing is defined by me, 2 milligrams per serving, 3 milligrams per serving, nothing that's 5 more, even 4 and more, although 4 sometimes, but 4 or more is erring on the side of non-microdosing. But I try to microdose. But it's one thing to attempt to microdose or intend to microdose. It's a whole nother thing to understand how to properly infuse the food and infuse it so where you're creating homogeneous mixtures. Mixtures where the cannabis that is inside your foodstuff is evenly distributed, so that you aren't going to get, 1 tablespoon over here that has 15 milligrams and 1 tablespoon over here that may have no milligrams. I'm going to demonstrate how to create cannabis-infused food very safely. And this is what I call batch cooking, okay? The batch approach. And there are obviously ways that you can guarantee the exact dosage of a foodstuff. But that is only if you are individually dosing that. Whether you do or you are following my instructions here and I do this perfectly, there is always going to be a slight tolerance, no matter what you're creating, especially in this batch process, okay? So what I've done is similar to my chicken kale meatballs, is I've taken some cherry tomatoes, I rinse them under warm water. Why warm water? Because warm water rinses away all those impurities. Anytime you're gonna eat an apple, a peach, a plum, anything that you're gonna have the skin of, always rinse it under warm water first, get rid of those impurities. Then you can shock it under cold water, no problem. Grapes, perfect example. My 100-year-old grandmother, she's turning 100 in Pompano Beach, Florida in August. She taught me that years ago. Years ago, she was ahead of her time. So I rinse them under cold water, or excuse me, warm water, then cold water. I put them into a pan. And all I did to this all I did to these cherry tomatoes, okay, was take my olive oil and just cover the bottom of the pan. That was it. Just cover the bottom of the surface of the pan. I covered this, and it turns to from a dry mixture, all the tomato skins split, and now they're covered in all that beautiful tomato water, okay? So we are going to create my favorite, and it's a signature. It's an infused cherry tomato sauce. What does it look like? It actually takes on a cream tomato sauce because we're creating an emulsification, okay? So this emulsification, we're going to use an isolate, okay? This is an isolate that is 20 milligrams per milliliter, okay? So 20 milligrams per milliliter. So I'm going to plan on serving five people from this serving size, okay? So 5 people, which means that if I do this properly, there will be approximately 4 milligrams, this is CBD, 4 milligrams of CBD in this cherry tomato sauce, okay? We're just gonna use simple math. So all I'm doing is taking these cherry tomatoes. This whole thing took about 20 minutes, nothing more. And you can see all the liquid, all the tomato skins split, all the tomato juices come out. And the only liquid you see in there is just the actual tomato juice. Okay, so we're just gonna put that right into the blender. We're going to add our isolate. So this is a CBD isolate, and I'm adding 1/4 teaspoon. Okay. We're going to season it because everything and anything that I do, Dr. Kaplan, is food first. This is all about flavor first. It's not about how high or how much psychoactive effect I can have or my food can have. This is about demonstrating the whole plant experience. So when you come for a 15-course meal, you're having THC, you're having CBD, you're having different terpene profiles, and you're also having raw flour. So in here, that's the cherry tomatoes, the olive oil, that beautiful liquid that came out of the cherry tomatoes, and our isolate. We're simply going to season with some salt and pepper, and then we're going to throw it onto our blender. You could use an immersion blender right into that saucepan. I prefer a high-speed blender, especially when we are emulsifying cannabis into food. This ensures a much more homogeneous mixture than an immersion blender. Okay, so I'm just going to put this on here. One thing that's critical, and oftentimes people don't realize it until it's too late, anytime you're going to puree something, anytime you're going to puree something that's hot, you have to remove the top, the inner circle here, to allow that steam to escape. Otherwise, that pressure is going to build inside our blender, and then the moment you take it off, the pressure has to go somewhere. That tomato puree is going to be on my white ceiling. Okay, so I'm just going to puree this, and you're going to see what's going to happen is it's sort of bright red right now with some yellowy, orangey hues, and now it's going to turn a very bright orange. And it's just going to go for a second, and we're emulsifying. So emulsifying is taking 2 ingredients that don't normally mix and combining them to make one homogeneous mixture. Caesar dressing is a perfect example. Mayonnaise is another, okay? So you can see the steam's coming out of here. That's beautiful. I'm gonna pour it into the bowl so you can see just how the color has changed. See how beautiful, vibrant red that is? So now we know that the cannabis is evenly distributed, okay? So we know, and this is why, yes, it's all about simple math, but we also want to employ measuring cups because we want to know what this yield is so we can divide it by the 5 portions and make sure that we are labeling that out properly. Otherwise, what's the point in trying to create something where you can actually tell someone what's in their food stuff if you're not going to give equal portions? Unless, of course, that's not your intention, which it should be. So I'm actually going to just pour this quickly into here. We'll look at our yield. I'll just tell you very quickly. So it looks like it's about 1 3/4 cups. So I'm going to say 2 cups. Okay, it's just about 2 cups. So we are talking about 2 cups divided by 5. So when you're talking about 2 cups, you're talking about what? 2 cups is 500 milliliters. Okay, 2 cups is 250 milliliters per cup. 2 cups is 500 milliliters, 5 portions, it's 100 milliliters each. Simple. So that's how we know that we are going to serve our guests exactly what it is we're telling them. And here's why that's critical, because it helps people understand their cannabis sweet spot. Where do you feel good and where do you not feel good? Because if you feel good here, and you know for certain that 10 milligrams is your sweet spot, well, now if you go out and you are served by someone else like me, who can tell you exactly what the dosage is in your food stuff, you are assured that you're going to have a similar or same experience. And that's a repeatable experience. It's essential to anyone who is trying to really come into this industry, and both from a consumer standpoint and from someone who's executing, because it comes with a lot of responsibility to ensure that you know that you are serving your clients, you are serving your friends exactly what you're telling them. That's all about, or that is creating that repeatable experience.
And the magic underneath there also, sort of understated is, why are we thinking about this? Why are we talking about sort of individual dosing? It's because the power of cannabis medicine is really not with doctors that are prescribing it the same way that we do in regular medicine. It's really, people can grow this medicine. They can buy it and choose to do with it as they see fit. That's different than other medicines. And it's really, like you're saying, it's important for us to be responsible about it, to be organized so that we can have that repeatable experience.
And you want to make sure, listen, we talked offline that the misconceptions are that you need to have that psychoactive impact in order to achieve the desired effect. And the truth is you don't. Right. You can have CBD isolate where there is not going to be that psychoactive effect. And so if you're looking for something strictly for health and wellness, like me, where my psoriasis is all about my inflammation, it's all about my gut health, it's all about what's going on inside. It has nothing to do with what's going on with my skin. Nothing. It's all from the inside. So if it's only about CBD, or inflammation, I want to make sure that I know exactly how much cannabis is in my food or CBD is in my food, because I know, quite frankly, 20 milligrams a day keeps me really healthy. Not enough, and I'll see a little bit of effect. Too much, and I actually get a little bit of an adverse effect. It's just, and I think that's the other critical part here, is that it's such an individual plan.
Knowing yourself, right.
That's it. It's such an individual plan. No one can tell an individual what they should or shouldn't do. And the other part of it is all of these misconceptions about, the strains of cannabis, and we're not talking enough, quite frankly, yet about terpenes and the effect so there are no cannabinoids at all in terpenes, and these terpenes, which, are all the incredible aromatics in cannabis, that have these incredible medicinal impact on us. And so, especially, and highlighted too, when used with different CBD and or THC, products. So it's really incredible. And it doesn't ever have to be, I'm not afraid of getting high. You don't have to get high.
No, for sure. And I think, with regard to the terpenes, one of the things that will come through to the culture, I think eventually, is terpenes have the power to sort of act as a steering wheel for some of the cannabinoid effects. With respect to skin stuff, lotions, the cannabinoids inside lotions, if it's just cannabinoids, work. But they don't work as well. They don't penetrate the skin as deeply. They don't, involve themselves in the tissues beneath the skin as deeply unless there are terpenes. Certain terpenes
I didn't
have
know
different effects.
So I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Wow. I had no idea. I see. Okay. Well, I didn't know that.
You know, one of the things that we'll have to teach you and teach the audience is how to make their own lotions. And you know, perhaps, you know, if for example you're cooking this delicious cherry tomato meal, if you added a little bit of mint sprig, that's going to allow the cannabinoids, the CBD in this case, to penetrate your tissues differently than if the mint sprig wasn't there.
100%.
And mint obviously has menthol, which is a cannabinoid, which is a terpene in cannabis, as well as obviously mint.
So before I was coming on, I had strawberries and mint ready to go. And I was going to do something, and then I said, you know what? The macaroons have chocolate chips. I'm going to demonstrate a quick chocolate sauce instead. So, you know, it is all about the terpenes. And I would tell you, you know, if just to draw the analogy to food, you know, terpenes, the flavonoids, the aromatics, they're so critical to what we're creating with cannabis and without cannabis. That's why every nut you use, every seed you use, every spice you use, you want to toast these. You want to highlight them. You want to release all those beautiful essential oils, and that's what aromatizes your food. It's really the same thing in how I employ terpenes with cannabis. And I love taking terpenes for my sleep. I absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. So I was mentioning to you, I want just this last little quick sort of, you know, recipe is one of my favorite cookies that I created as a result of my new diet is a takeoff of, you know, a Passover macaroon. And I always love that sort of flavor. And I have a granola recipe on my site. I absolutely love it. And I was tasting it one day. I'm like, wow, that flavor, I recognize that. That's a macaroon. So I made a cookie that has 2 ingredients. Today I added some vegan chocolate chips to it, but it's really a blank canvas. You can do what you want to it. And it's just, all it is shredded coconut and maple syrup. And you put enough in there so that they can ball together and just come together. So what happens is when you throw those into the oven, the maple syrup starts to warm up all the water. Well, what's maple syrup? It's just water and maple sugar. So as the maple syrup starts to warm up, you've got the water that's evaporating from the maple syrup, and all of those crystals, they're starting to come together. Those maple sugars starting to produce together. So now what happens when all the water's gone? Well, you've left with all those crystals, and what are those maple crystals? Candy. So it forms this hard outer shell, which creates, and so here's the other part. Beautiful byproduct is that maple syrup sort of seeps right down and pools. And as all that water's evaporating, all you're left with is the maple sugar. That's all this is maple sugar right there. That's just pure maple sugar, okay? So what I thought I would do is to highlight this, I would make a quick sauce. To again, we demonstrated savory. I'd be remiss if I didn't demonstrate sweet, and I'm always about the healthier version. Please,
Jordan. Hey, couple details, because I'm gonna practice this at home. What are you putting on the pan to make it come off so easily? Are you using wax paper?
Just parchment paper, absolutely.
Parchment, okay.
Yeah, parchment paper lined baking sheet. I can share this one with you as well.
Great, yeah. Perfect. If you share the written version, so just so people who are
parchment paper lined baking sheet. You can certainly oil your pan, but it doesn't. You could use a silpat. Silpats are perfect, obviously, but parchment paper lined baking sheet or silicone lined baking sheet is perfect. And what happens is you need to allow these things to cool. As they cool, they harden. Okay, so, but it's truly the easiest thing. Chopped pecans, chopped almonds, dried raisins, dried apricots, everything is amazing in this little cookie, okay? So I thought I'd create this really simple chocolate sauce to go along with it. This chocolate sauce has, and all my desserts are always 100% plant-based. So this has raw cacao, great for us. Maple syrup, which, okay, I mean, I'm in Canada, so how can I use anything but maple syrup? And I've got almond milk. Okay, so 3 simple ingredients. We're gonna add some cannabis oil. So I love cannabis oil. But the thing is, when I'm using something that's, 20 milligrams per milliliter, and, it's gonna get lost. I'm 20 grams, 1 milliliter, it's a quarter teaspoon. Like, that's what a quarter teaspoon is. In all of this raw cacao and maple syrup, you're never, ever, ever going to taste that cannabis. If you love the taste of cannabis, all the power to you. For me, it's always about highlighting the great food. I want to highlight a great food experience. It's also about how the plant works, and I highlight the plant and the flavor of the plant in different ways, but not when I'm making chocolate. I want you to taste chocolate because I want you to have a great experience, okay? So I'm just gonna puree this. This is totally raw, and what's gonna happen is, yes, it's going to emulsify, it's going to become homogeneous, but what's gonna do that is the cacao. The cacao is what's gonna cause this to come together, or help it come together, excuse me. We're done, and that's it. Gorgeous. So I'll pour this into a measuring cup. I always like to know what my yield is, right? A quarter teaspoon went in, so I know 20 milligrams went in, and I want to know what came out. So it's 1 cup came out. So I'm going to yield 5 portions. It's 50 milliliters per, okay? And it's really as simple as that. That you make sure that when you are creating your foods, that you create these homogeneous mixtures. Look how beautiful and silky this looks. And it was only 3 ingredients plus the cannabis. Okay, so now in terms of this, I absolutely love playing with my food. So I'm just gonna do, we'll just pour that right on top and go. And it's just, it's just about being true to what you and your family like to eat, what you, your significant others like to eat from a food perspective. You use the ingredients that you love. I use the ingredients that I love. I recipe the foods that I love to eat, and I encourage people to play with their food and be creative. But the most important thing when it comes to cannabis is there are two sort of schools of thought. One, there are ways that you can infuse your cannabis safely. Jeff Danzer, I interviewed him the other day, Jeff the 420 chef, as well as Diego Ladiosa. Those two, they love to take right from raw flower. They do their own infusions. They'll send them out to the lab for testing. They'll use their calculators, and within a certain tolerance, they can tell you, if it hasn't gone out for testing, what the percentage of THC is or what the percentage of CBD is. For me, I don't want it to be, it's in and around. I want to know that it's 20.36 milligrams per milliliter, because I need to be as accurate as I can, not only for my guests, which is really critical, but for me as well, because I have learned what's best for my skin, what's best for my mental and physical health. And I want to recreate that on a daily basis. And if I don't know what's in my food stuff, how could I possibly recreate that experience? Mm-hmm. That's why you got to find your cannabis sweet spot. You got to make sure you're buying product that you know exactly what's in it, and you know exactly how to utilize that cannabis into your food stuff so that you can safely dose your food for you and others.
It's brilliant. I think the chaos that sometimes people see, that you see as cannabis, that it's, oh, it seems to be good for everything, and it's so wishy-washy because we don't have any major clinical trials, and all this kind of wishy-washy stuff becomes so organized in the way that you describe it, the way that you're recommending that people make it. It makes so much sense, and it's actually one of the really appealing parts about cooking with cannabis in this way, that this funnel of information and confusion gets streamlined into a really organized path. If you know what you're doing, if you're doing the simple math as you described, you can understand. And even if you don't know what your dose is, you can learn about it as long as you're being methodical, as long as you're keeping track. Oh, last time I tried 20 milliliters. This time I'll try 30 milliliters. And then you sort of figure that out, but you do it in an organized way.
And you know what's interesting about that? And that is not unlike every dermatologist I've ever gone to in my entire life. Okay, try this. Nope, didn't work. Try this. Try Puva. Try methotrexate. Try cyclosporin. Try going into the hospital. Try. And it's all trial and error. And so it's, sometimes I hear that excuse that it's not a fine science. I'm like, well, is any autoimmune, like, I don't know, like, are any treatments of like a perfect science for any one human being? Not that I know of. So why should this be any different? And plus, we've been using this for a hell of a lot longer than we've been using any of the medicines on the market ever. Right. So,
I mean, thousands of years that humans have been growing, consuming. I mean, the founding documents of the United States, cannabis was actually used as a currency in the original colonies. It's just been part of the human fabric forever, literally. Unfortunately, what we're talking about really under here is the stigma that this has been such a normal part of everyday life in human culture. But in the last 80, 90 years, it's changed significantly because of, political, social interests that, we are in the middle of disseminating. It's making it normal for consuming at home. It's people like me who are teaching this and making it part of regular medicine. This is what we're all doing as a community to bring us back to a place of normalcy.
That's right. And I was going to say, it takes people like you and I in our respective, domains and arenas to come out and say, listen, I'm not some sort of degenerate. Yeah, I love the Grateful Dead and I love fish, but I can honestly tell you that I'm a contributing member of society, and I'm a pain in the butt to my wife sometimes, but I'm still a contributing member to society. And I'm here and you're here and others are here to say that it's time for those stigmas to be, gone away. Those stigmas need to go away. They need to fall by the wayside. It's no longer about, getting high. It's about using cannabis for whatever purposes suit you best. I use cannabis recreationally. I absolutely do. But I didn't realize that the reason I used it so often recreationally is because I needed it medicinally, because I needed it to deal with my chronic illness, the chronic pain that I felt all the time. And it's not an escape. It actually just helped me deal with my pain. And instead of taking Atarax every day for my itching, I took cannabis. And it wasn't until I was 43 years old, honestly, doctor, that I realized, holy smokes, like, this is for medicinal reasons. It's not only because I do enjoy the psychoactive effect.
Sure, no, understood. Jordan, how do people who want to get in touch with you and learn more about what you are and who you are and where your offerings are, how do they get to connect with you?
Yeah, I mean, I have a podcast every week called In the Weeds. It's a food first podcast. It does focus, cannabis is a component of it, only because I am not a cannabis chef. I always call myself, I'm a chef who's been in the business for 30 years. Cannabis is just an amazing ingredient that I use, just like basil and cilantro and everything else. But I have In the Weeds. It's a great podcast. It drops every week. Obviously, Chef Jordan Wagman on all social media platforms. But please come check out. I hope everyone listens to my podcast. And but you can find me anywhere and everywhere. And I'm always available. My DMs are always open in terms of accepting or looking to help you. If you have questions or just thoughts, I'm always happy to help with recipes. And I say it's funny. I often say, my line is, I don't even play a doctor on TV. So it's a good thing that we have another great looking doctor over here. So I'm not here to give medical advice, but I am here to have an empathetic ear.
Yeah, no, we're all here, as you said earlier, we're all here together as a community. Of course, people can reach out to us too. If anybody has specific questions they want to email, our address is questions@cedclinic.com. And if any question, comes aimed toward you, I'll certainly pass it along. I'm planning on joining your podcast, so we're going to hopefully see, much more of this teamwork. I think we're a great pair, and I think we have a lot to bring to people, both from different angles.
Agreed.
I'm excited. Awesome. So this has really been a spectacular success. It's an honor to host, and it's a privilege to learn from you. So it's really one of my favorites so far.
Thank you so much for having me. And I've been a fan of yours, and I'm glad we could connect in person.
In person for now. Well, maybe that's the goal for next year. Is we'll try to have an event and maybe bring some people in and bring it to the real world.
That'd be great. I look forward to that.
Thanks a lot.
My pleasure. Thank you. Take care.